Hi, Immanuel.
Hello.
Hi, can you see me and hear me, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So, thank you very much for today's session. Actually, this is the second session of the so-called AKSE EPEL special lecture series in the field of Korean studies. And last time you could hear a presentation about Buddhism in North Korea. And today we have a guest from Washington, D.C., Professor Immanuel Kim, and his presentation titled Rebranding North Korean Visual Media. And of course, I will briefly introduce him, but before, I would like to thank you for attending, and of course, in front of the computers, wherever you are. And also, I have to feel my deepest gratitude to the funding organizations, so the Korea Foundation, and of course, AKSE, so Association for Korean Studies in Europe, for the very nice and perfect supervision of this program. So, Professor Immanuel Kim is an associate professor and the Korea Foundation Kim Renault Professor of Korean Literature and Cultural Studies at the GWU, so George Washington University. He is a specialist not only in North Korean literature. You can see of his first monograph, Rewriting Revolution, Women, Sexuality, and Memory in North Korean Fiction, published by the University of Hawaii Press in 2018. And his first translation book is the so-called Friend. It's about a North Korean bestseller written by Paek Nam-hyung. So actually, he visited North Korea and he met the original author as well. So in the Q&A session, of course, you are more than encouraged to ask questions also about this. So this book, this translation was released by Columbia University Press in 2020. And talking about his other main research field, that is North Korean cinema. He's the first scholar who published a book about North Korean comedy genre, a very highly popular film genre in the DPRK. The title of the book is Laughing North Koreans, the Culture of Comedy Films, published by Lexington Books in 2020. And talking about his two latest publications, actually the Hidden Heroes is his second translation. It's a joint work with Professor Benoit Bertelier from the University of Sydney, and it focuses on the so-called new protagonists of the North Korean literary and cinematic films emerged in the 1980s, mainly. So they were the hidden heroes, which show the sharp contrast from the earlier, so the 1970s revolutionary heroes and heroines. And actually, it was published yesterday officially, so 11th of March, 2025 by Anthem Press. And in July, we will have the opportunity to read his latest book entitled Rebranding North Korea, Changes in Consumer Culture and Visual Media, again released by the University of Hawaii Press, 2025. And Professor Kim focuses in this book on the technological development, not just on the big screen, but also on the small screen of North Korea. So today's presentation is actually can be a good promotion for his latest book. And before giving the virtue for Professor Kim, I would like to announce a very small technical issue here. The lecture will last for around 50 or 60 minutes. And of course, after the lecture, you are mostly welcome to ask your questions. And of course, in front of the computer, you can use the chat box, or the raise hand button if you have any questions. So let's welcome Professor Kim with a big applause. And yeah, I hope you think that.
All right. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Dr. Kim. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much, Professor Sibo. It's a pleasure to join you from Washington, D.C. I haven't been to Olomouc. Is that how you say it?
Yeah, Olomouc. Yeah.
Olomouc, yes. I've only been to Prague, and perhaps next time this will be a good reason for me to visit Olomouc as well. But I want to thank everyone, the students who are attending this lecture and everyone online. And I want to thank Professor Sibo and AKSE for making this happen. All right, I will share my screen and we'll begin Rebranding North Korea Visual Media. I will be talking about the general history of visual culture in North Korea. But before I begin, I want to show you a clip. As you see here, it's a black and white, almost like a documentary. And this was made in the 1970s. Just take a look at the visual representations of TV. So if you can read Korean, it quickly went by, but it said Samsung. So this was a South Korean advertisement for Samsung television in the 1970s. Then I want to show you this.
가정용 코카콜라예요. 혼자이면 6잔 나오니까 보통 병으로 살 때보다 120원 이상인 일이죠. 1피씩 큰 막에다 두었다 시원하게 마실 수 있어요. 1리터병 가정용 코카콜라 말이에요. 형태적이고 똑똑하죠. 보세요. 요새 주부들 사이에 아주 인기가 있어요.
So this is also a South Korean commercial for Coca-Cola. This is not North Korea. However, this is supposed to be a grocery store in South Korea. And you can tell the shelves, the way the items were put on the shelves, even her echoing voice. By the way, she's a very famous actor in South Korea. You could just tell by the visualization that this is a very dated commercial. This was in the 1980s. Okay. And finally, I want to show you this.
저 감독님 보그를 써도 되겠습니까? 그럼 연습을 더해서 50%까지 올리겠습니다. 별빛군. 다시 한번 해볼까?
All right. So this, in the 1990s, was one of the most famous K-dramas. And I remember watching this and just being blown away by how cool it was. Looking back 30 years, it's a very dated K-drama. There's no K-drama today that will shoot it like this. Very cheesy. The music in the background is very cheesy. The film angles, the slow motion, everything we would say is very cheesy today, right? Nobody would make films like this. What's interesting to me is that when we talk about South Korea, especially K-drama, commercials, reality TV shows, we judge North Korea based on South Korea's performance and South Korea's production today. And we say North Korea is very dated, old style. The visualization is old. The camera angles, the lighting, the microphone, everything is old. But we often forget that South Korea also experienced this kind of dated production. But we forget it because today's South Korea production is so well advanced that when we look back at dramas like this in the 1990s, instead of saying, oh my God, it was so poorly produced and things like that, we don't say it like that. We say, oh, it's so nostalgic. Oh, God, the good old days. But whenever we compare it with North Korea, we say, oh, well, North Korea is so backwards. It's behind the times. Technology was terrible. However, if you compare the 70s in North Korea to South Korea, 80s North Korea and South Korea, and even the 90s, the film production actually was quite similar. Starting from the 2000s, South Korea goes well beyond North Korea. But we often forget that North Korea and South Korea, in terms of production-wise, they were quite similar from the 1970s. So we need to look at the context of North Korean production to see how far they've come. So Professor Sivo graciously announced my books. The way I look at North Korea, my methodology is, number one, in order to understand North Korea, you have to know what the state narrative is. The state narrative typically is what the party wants you to know. It's all about the leaders. It's about nationalism. So if you understand what the grand narrative is about, then you're almost there in terms of understanding North Korea. The problem with this is most people only focus on the grand narrative. And when you do that, then you're missing out on some of the details of the society. The second way to look at it is the individual stories, the individual narratives in the story. The problem with this is if you only look at the individual story, then you also miss out on the bigger context of North Korean society and culture. So the third way to do it is you have to understand the state narrative, you have to understand the individual narrative, and see how they come together, or see how they fall apart. And to me, this is a very interesting way to understand North Korea. So in my first book, regarding North Korean literature, I state what the state wants the readers to know, but it's also what the individual stories are doing as well and how they are conflicting. Oftentimes, we think of North Korea as the state narrative has to match with the individual narrative, and all the individuals are praising the leader, and that's it. They're all brainwashed. They only think of the nation, the party, and that's true. And that would be a typical story in North Korea, but that's not always the case. And so the novel that I translated, Friend, really shows how the state narrative and the individual narrative comes together, but also how they fall apart. And for me, the second book regarding North Korean comedy films, it really shows how the individual narrative and the state narrative conflict with each other. Because after all, comedy pushes the limits of what the party really wants you to do. I'll talk about the drama films in a second, but the dramatic films typically follow the state narrative. However, comedy films challenge the narrative. And to me, that is always a little bit more interesting. And then finally, my third book, Rebranding North Korea, which I will talk about mostly today, is how the consumer culture now in North Korea has changed completely. The way people watch films, the way people watch television has completely changed. And because of this visual transformation, we see how the state narrative and the individual narrative also conflict and produce something new. Not the old style of revolution, socialism, and all that, but it's something else. It's about individual consumer desires. So we'll talk about that. In order to understand North Korean visual media, you have to understand the three phases in the film industry. And this is a specialization of Professor Sivo. He wrote a book about Shin Sang-wook. And the way I understand North Korean film history is, number one, pre-Shin Sang-wook period. And by the way, Shin Sang-wook is a South Korean director that went up to North Korea to produce films. And then while he was there, the Shinsango period, the impact that he's had in the film industry, and then the post-Shinsango period. That's usually how we can understand the division of the film industry. Okay, so what is the pre-Shinsango period? This is what Kim Jong-il, the son of Kim Il-sung, calls the masterpieces of North Korean film. If you want to understand North Korean film history, you have to know the masterpieces. For example, the Five Guerrilla Brothers, Sea of Blood. For those who have not seen Sea of Blood, I highly recommend it. However, just to warn you, it's like 4.5 hours long. So if you want to watch this film, you have to bring your breakfast, lunch, and dinner to be prepared to watch this film. And of course, if you really have to know and want to know North Korean film, you have to know The Flower Girl. If you have not seen The Flower Girl, please go home today, click on YouTube, and type in Flower Girl and watch it. This has had a huge impact in North Korea, not just in terms of propaganda. Remember, there's the state narrative. We all know what the state narrative is. Okay? But I'm talking about something else, the cultural narrative. The Flower Girl was such an impactful film in the culture that her face was actually printed on the currency. Not only that, Flower Girl was internationally well known as well, especially in China. And I've met so many mainland Chinese people who have come up to me and said, Flower Girl changed my life. And if you look at the film production in the 1970s in China, yes, North Korea's Flower Girl production was much better. In fact, I'll even say that the Flower Girl, in terms of visualization, was better than most South Korean films made in the 1970s. It entered a film festival, and I believe this film festival is well known in the Czech Republic. You all might know this. It's an annual, it's still running today. And in 1972, The Flower Girl entered this film festival, and it won a special award. We don't know what the award is, but it's a special award. And of course, North Korea took this prize and advertised it widely in the state newspaper. So Kim Jong-il wrote a book called On the Art of the Cinema. Now, we all know that Kim Jong-il loves to watch films. However, there is a difference between enjoying films and making films. Those two are very different. For those sitting in that classroom, you might enjoy listening to K-pop, but singing K-pop is a different thing. You might enjoy watching K-drama, but making K-drama is a different thing. However, the problem here is Kim Jong-il thought that because he loves film so much that he could also make films. So he wrote this book. And this book is about how to direct, how to act, how to make music, how to edit the scenes from one scene to another, camera angles, lighting, everything. The problem is he is not professionally trained. And when he published this book, he made all the filmmakers follow his rules and principles in the book. So you could imagine the trouble, the problem that this created. The filmmakers understood how to make a film. However, now the leader is telling them that you should make films in this way. It limits their creativity greatly. And we'll come back to this later. So this is Shin Sang-ok, who came up to North Korea, and next to him is the dear General Kim Jong-il, the film genius in North Korea. And next to him is Shin Sang-ok's ex-wife, Cheon-hee. Now, Cheon-hee was one of the most beautiful, considered one of the most beautiful South Korean actors in the 1950s. And then they got divorced. She came up to North Korea first. And I believe, I mean, Professor Sivo could elaborate on this further, but I think it's like a few years later, Shin Sang-ok came up, and Kim Jong-il invited Shin Sang-ok to a dinner, and that's where they met for the first time in like 3 years. You could imagine how shocked Shin Sang-ok was to meet his ex-wife, of all places, in Pyongyang. Not the most ideal place to meet your ex-wife. And they lived there for, I believe, 6 years, making films, and they eventually escaped from North Korea while they were in Vienna. Okay. So now we're in the Shin Sang-ok period. We have to understand the impact Shin Sang-ok has had in the visual media. This is a classic film called Honggil-dong, which has had a huge impact on Shin Sang-ok, or Shin Sang-ok has had a huge impact in the film production here. And already, by the camera angles, the different shots, the spider web, the Japanese ninjas. Okay, so these are supposed to be Japanese ninja assassins. In other words, they're supposed to secretly kill. However, they are the loudest assassins I've ever heard in my life. Great show.
피리 부는 사나이 본명은 홍길동.
So this was made in the 1980s. For those who are familiar with Hong Kong kung fu films in the 1970s, this has kung fu film written all over it. Let me show you a different clip. This is the same movie, just to show you a different kind of scene. So the idea is there's a lot of action, and it was something completely new, never seen, never done before in North Korea. And it really had a cultural impact on the North Koreans. Number one, the main character, Honggil-dong, he became not only one of the most famous actors in North Korea, but he became the heartthrob, the sex icon for many, many North Korean women. Not only was it popular in North Korea, but it was popular in the Eastern Bloc of the Soviet Union as well. So, for example, a friend of mine who is Hungarian told me that he watched Hongryultong when he was a kid and he was blown away. It was so cool, and it had that kind of impact even in someone from Bulgaria. Here's another film called Wolmi Island, and this film is about the Korean War, where the US is coming into Incheon through Wolmi Island, and there's this North Korean army based in Wolmi Island, and they're fighting against the US. So one of the reasons this film became a huge hit is deep sense of nationalism. Again, the state narrative is either the party, the leader, or the nation. So if a film is about protecting the nation, that is considered the state narrative. And here, the individual narrative is the individual people, the soldiers, who are sacrificing themselves to support the country. Right? So this is considered a blockbuster hit in North Korea. To us, it looks a little nationalistic. However, we have to understand that there were films in Hollywood like this. This film is called 300, where it's a group of 300 Spartans who are fighting against the Persian Empire. And this was a big hit in the US and globally.
These Spartans are descended from Hercules himself, taught never to retreat, never to surrender, taught that death on the battlefield is the greatest glory he could achieve in his life. Spartans, the finest soldiers.
So we have to ask, what's the difference between a small group of North Korean army fighting against this huge imperialist American soldiers and this small group of 300 Spartans fighting against this huge Persian Empire? The story is identical. There's nothing that is different about the stories. The only difference is context. One is located in North Korea, and this one is located or was produced in Hollywood. That's the only difference. So in terms of storyline, there's just absolutely no difference. It's only the perception and the context of the films. We like one film, but we don't like the other film. That was the Wolmi Island was made in the 1980s. 1990s was perhaps the worst period in North Korea because of the famine and the death of the great leader, that there was hardly any production. And then in the early 2000s, North Korea attempted to come back into the film industry. And one of the main ones that they produced and entered into a film festival was this film called The Schoolgirl's Diary. And here, one of the big shocking factors was this is the opening shot, and there is an American imperialist ambassador, the Mickey Mouse icon. And scholars were shocked by this opening. How can North Korea open with an American icon? And so a lot of people were interested in this film, and it didn't do so well in the film festival. However, it did show how North Korea was trying to come back from the devastation of the famine and the death of their leader. The story of this film is very typical in North Korea. In fact, even the film angles, the film production is very dated. it looks like a 1980s or a 1990s film production. That's because they haven't really advanced since the 1990s. And this would be a pretty classic opening in North Korean film. A large landscape and the title written across it. And even the film quality seems very dated. What's really interesting about this film, also in the early 2000s, was that the film quality is actually quite good. Again, it has that very martial arts, kung fu style film production. Skip this one. Okay, some box office hits in North Korea. If you want to know, if you ever meet a North Korean and you tell them, hey, I've seen or I know about these films, they'll be very impressed by you. Number one, The Nation and Destiny. This is one of the longest running series in North Korea, like over 100 episodes. However, for me, the best one in terms of action and drama, suspense, is Nameless Heroes, that was made and produced in the 1970s. It's a 20-part spy film, and it is excellent. Now, just to warn you, it's not like the James Bond action-packed dramatic, suspenseful film. No, it's very theatrical. In other words, it's very slow. It looks like they are on stage and performing to an audience. It doesn't actually feel like a film. Right? And this is very typical of North Korean films. A lot of it is shot as if these actors were on stage rather than on a film set. And Nameless Heroes was a huge hit. If you ask North Korean defectors, hey, what do you think about Nameless Heroes? They love it. They think it's one of the best series North Korea has ever produced. And I agree. It is one of the best series ever produced. However, it resembles a lot like the Russian 17 Moments of Spring. And for those who are familiar with 17 Moments of Spring, it's also very slow. And I believe Nameless Heroes was deeply influenced by this Russian film. This actor, Kim Yong-min, is one of the most famous actors in North Korea. Hands down, he is in almost every major dramatic films. He would be considered, I don't know, like a Tom Hanks, George Clooney, Jack Nicholson, right? If you know some Hollywood actors. And then next to him is this actor, Kim Tae-young. He's my favorite actor because he's a comedian. He started off as a comedian, and his entire career was comedy. And one of his most famous film is My Family's Problem. My Family's Problem is about a wife here who loves materialistic things, and she buys mink coats, leather sofa, all kinds of stuff. And her husband is telling her, hey, please don't do this, right? You don't have the correct socialist mentality. And she's like, I don't care about socialism. I don't care about all that. I want to enjoy life, right? And so there's a problem here. Now, when they produced this film, Kim Jong-il did not like it. This is what he had to say about the film. The film not only has, the film I saw today, My Family's Problem, not only has an obvious ending meaning a comedy ending, but it lacks a strong narrative. And by that, he means it doesn't have the state narrative, the glorification of the leader, the party, or the nation. It doesn't have that. It does not follow the party's purpose and is made into a comedy. As a result, it is not worth watching, and it contains very little educational value. So this is Kim Jong-il's criticism against this film. He didn't like it. However, the people loved it, and it had a huge cultural impact. For example, this wife, she was so good at this role of being this evil wife that when she walked down the streets, little school children would point their fingers at her, make fun of her, say bad things about her, throw rocks at her and saying, go away, go away. She was also, she had a fiance, and he actually broke off the wedding because he said to her, hey, look, I know you're an actor, but you were so convincing in that role that if we get married, maybe you'll be that evil wife. And I cannot live with a woman like this. And how do I know this? She actually wrote it in a journal, and it was published in North Korea. So she went to the producers and said, you are ruining my career. Everyone thinks I'm a terrible person. So Kim Jong-il did not anticipate that this film was going to do very well. And when he realized that the film did very well and the people loved it, he told the filmmakers, hey, I want you to make a sequel. I want you to make one more film that now is about the party, that is about the country. I want you to make an educational film. So the filmmakers, they sat around the table and they started thinking, okay, how do we make a film that's supposed to be comedy, but it also praises the leader and has this educational value? How do you do that? Because once you do that, it gets really boring. And it took them 6 years to come up with the sequel. However, to me, I think the North Koreans have a great sense of humor because they finally came up with an idea. Not just one film that's a sequel, but a whole series. My family's problem, our next door neighbor's family's problem, our upstairs neighbor's problem, our downstairs neighbor's problem, our wife's family's problem, our older brother's family's problem, our sister's family's problem, our in-laws' family's problem, our younger brother's family's problem. Hey, we are all one family in North Korea. And when you thought that all the problems in North Korea could be resolved, our family's problem begins again. And the last one was made in 1988, our uncle's family's problem. And I don't know the exact reason why the uncle's family's problem was the last one in the series. However, my speculation is the film series was doing very well. People loved it. And they just wanted one more. I mean, it would be great to end the entire series with our family's problem begins again. I think that's a great way to end it. However, the people spoke, and the people wanted just one more film. And by the way, in this 12-part series, all of North Korea's famous comedians appeared in this film. The ones who were famous already appeared in this film, of course, and the ones who were rising also appeared. So this series was a debut series for a lot of the young generation. Both Nameless Heroes, the spy film series, and My Family's Problem series, comedy, drama and comedy, these two series became one of the biggest cultural phenomenon in North Korea. If you ever come across an elderly North Korean defector, someone in their 60s, 50s or 60s, and you ask them, hey, do you remember My Family's Problem? They will tell you how much they loved it. That's the kind of impact that this film has had, or this film series has had in North Korea. Okay. So 2000s was really no different from the 1990s and 1980s. We have to come to 2010s to finally see a change and a development in North Korean film industry. And one of the film collaborations with a British, Dutch, and North Korean filmmakers was Comrade Kim Goes Flying. This is a trailer for that film. Oh, not Dutch, Belgium.
엄마, 해를 되면 어떻게 하늘을 나나?
날개가 있기 때문이란.
나도 날개가 있으면 하늘을 날 수 있나?
그럼.
유했어.
버스 다니지 말고 땅에 밟고 살아라. 네, 직전에 드렸습니다. 땅 쏘스나 하늘을 날아보겠다고?
집에 두면 제 얼굴이 떨어진다는 걸 알아요.
내가 자꾸만 눈앞을 모르는 게 내가 된 거는 살이.
So this is a romantic comedy in North Korea. And you could tell the film production is very different. Already there was some little CGI, animation, the film angles, the lighting, the sound, the music in the background, everything was developing and getting better than the ones in the early 2000s and certainly the ones compared to 1990s and 80s. Now you might say, well, the only reason this film is different and better than North Korean films is it's a collaboration with a British and Belgian director. So of course, if it was made by Europeans, it's going to be better than the ones made in North Korea. Okay, that's a fair assessment. However, after Kim Jong-un, the current leader, after he took over, and after his father passed away, the film production and industry completely changed. And this is where we get to see a new generation, a transformation in the film production. Again, the state narrative, the one that you're supposed to praise the leader or the party or the country, that's always going to be the same. Okay? You can't change that in North Korea. In order for that to change, oh boy, it's going to require a tremendous political transformation in North Korea. So I don't expect that anytime soon. However, the way the story is told, the way the film is made or the TV show is made, that can change, and it certainly has changed. So this is a TV drama series about a ping pong table tennis player in North Korea, a true story, by the way, who won many gold medals.
Table tennis championship will be held for people all around the world.
So this is, I believe, the quarterfinals or the semifinals. And the North Korean table tennis player is going up against a South Korean table tennis player. Again, true story.
There's a lot of writers, but across America. Okay,
So the notable difference, I'll lower the volume here. The notable difference here is the film quality. They already put a filter in so that the color is very different. And then the film angles are very different. The way it's shot, the speed, the editing. There's a lot of action. Slow motion. And so forth. So, and this is not CGI. This is, they're actually real table tennis players. Actually, you need a little bit of music.
It's such a change in the situation.
So the North Korean player is down.
The young Korean player seem to be disappointed now. This year will decide the winner of this quarterfinal, and now there is only one sport left.
용순아, 이 타구공의 무게가 얼마일 것 같나?
And that's how the drama series opens. Wow. This when I saw this, I thought, this cannot be true. They completely changed the way drama series opens. Compared to my school, the Schoolgirl's Diary, the way this film opens is completely different. And here's another film that was made during the Kim Jong-un era. This is just a trailer. Already, this one is the opening is very different. There's a clay, instead of a claymation, this is animation, CGI. And in Korean, that says trailer.
저돌 타이어 예술영화 촬영소에서는 예술영화 하루나 단밤을 창작하여 내놓았습니다.
나가는 농부가 새로 왔는데 한번 마주 앉아 얘기 나눠볼 수도 없구만.
희열이 넘쳐 새 생활에 들어서는 우리의 주인공 나명주. 그러나 순진한 그의 눈동자에 비낀 것은 불미로운 생활만이 뿐이었습니다. 이로써 반가름되는 중반 계급 학생의 하루나 하루. 영화는 민족 최대의 경사스러운 영절인 해양절을 맞으며
So this film is not only really well produced, it's suspenseful, there's a lot of action. And if you didn't know this was a North Korean film, you would think that this is just a South Korean film production. That's how well made this film is. And so my interest in films and TV shows that were produced during the Kim Jong-un era is not only the way the film was shot, the angles, the lighting, the sound. Those are all good, and we'll continue to talk about that. But it's also what's in the background. In the past, when you watch North Korean films or TV shows, the background is typically political monuments, museums, bridges, towers, and whatnot that celebrate the country, the leader, and the history of the country. However, a lot of that has changed. And this is a TV drama series called waiting father. And in the background is a restaurant and department store. And this, you're going to see in a second, this is an intersection, and it is the wealthiest intersection in Pyongyang today. Now, the film quality is not very good here, but okay, right here. So this is an intersection, and in the back here is a real famous all-you-can-eat buffet in North Korea. Yes, all-you-can-eat buffet. You're thinking, what? How can starving North Koreans have an all-you-can-eat buffet? But they have it. So again, this intersection is one of the wealthiest intersections. The story is about a kindergartner who goes to this actual kindergarten, and the drama series was filmed at the kindergarten. Here it is. This is the kindergarten that Kim Jong-un's wife also went to, and it's only for those who have extraordinary talent in music, instruments, dramas, dancing, and whatnot. Here it is. Very typical North Korean photograph, yes. Here's Kim Jong-un congratulating the kids, or the kids are congratulating Kim Jong-un. So typically, films would have statues of the leader in the background, the monuments about the party, the Arc de Triomphe that is supposedly 10 centimeters taller than the one in Paris. And of course, the Juche Tower. You can never forget about the Juche Tower. So these would be typically in the background of North Korean dramas before Kim Jong-un took over. But after Kim Jong-un, now you have apartments. This is the same apartment intersection that I showed you earlier. This is the Beverly Hills, the Manhattan, the, I don't know what else, the Olomouc of Pyongyang, right? The wealthiest and the best place that everyone wants to hang out. And here are some latest apartments that Kim Jong-un has developed. This is the future scientists apartments, and over here, a lot of the professors, scientists, and people who are interested in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics students live here. This is the latest one called Yeomyong apartments. This is supposed to be very green with solar panels and all kinds of very green, quote unquote, green technologies. And this also appears in the drama series. This is the latest one, Songhwa, which is further down south in Pyongyang. And because they have so much land in this area, they were able to build this massive apartment complex. This one is right in the heart of Pyongyang. And this is a condominium. And one of the more famous person that lives here is, I don't know if you see North Korean news, but there's this older woman with the classic Korean dress, hanbok. And she always has this high pitched tone talking about the leaders or whatnot. She was given one of these condominiums right in the heart of Pyongyang. It's a beautiful condominium. Okay, so it's that kid again who is stuck in that intersection. Let's see what kind of apartment he lives in.
저녁이 빨리 일어나자요.
A modernized kitchen. He has a bed and a Hello Kitty. I don't know why there's a Hello Kitty right next to him. The next clip is he hears music. He runs past the flat screen TV. There is his neighbor with a stereo in the background and a flat screen TV playing the piano.
Come on, you go.
So again, it's showing this kind of luxurious lifestyle, this new kind of consumerist lifestyle that we haven't seen in previous North Korean dramas. Here is a short comedy film, again, showing the latest apartments.
힘껏 치며 7, 8.
Inside of his apartment, he's wearing silk pajamas, stereo system in the back. And this film is about recycling. It's a very funny drama series. Here's another one. This is the opening of the comedy film, and it opens with the camera in the water. Using her mobile phone to look up different recipes or different ways to study. And this film is about gender inequality. Later on, the husband thinks that he's better than his wife, but learns his lesson in the end.
미안해 속하니.
This one is a real famous one. This one is about people who are addicted to games on their phone or the computer. Everyone is learning the latest technology at a computer lab. Everyone's studying very hard. Here's a manager. But he's playing games. And this is another short clip, but this I want to show a longer clip of this because I think this really demonstrates clearly how the mise en scène, the background, the background is all about the new consumer lifestyle in North Korea. So here's the latest apartment that they made. Here's a guy on his mobile phone. He wants to impress his new manager. And he goes to the store and he buys all kinds of foods and drinks to impress the new manager. So the grocery store is already very different from previous grocery stores in North Korea. And he's walking along the famous streets of that new apartment complex. And all the other workers, they're curious, where is that guy? You know, and they said, oh, I think he's at this one apartment. And here he is trying to impress this manager. And the idea is you shouldn't try to bribe your way up the corporate ladder. You should work hard. What's interesting about this is he discovers that his fellow workers are going to come to this apartment, and now he's in a rush to hide. But the way the camera goes through the entire apartment shows exactly how the entire apartment looks. And if you watch closely here, he's scared, he's running around. There he is, and he goes into a room, and there's a young girl watching from like a 60-inch TV. Right? And that's all that's in the room. So the idea is to show the viewers, hey, North Koreans have like the 60-inch flat screen TV as well. He falls on a leather sofa. He hides behind it. There's a nice set of curtains right behind him. All of this is to show this new kind of consumption that North Koreans are doing. He goes to the veranda, and his only option is to do the unthinkable. Of course, he's not going to do that. Instead, it's a comedy, so he falls, he trips, and he gets, soap water all over him. And in the end, he gets caught. His fellow comrades come, and this is the last shot. Again, the background is not this political monuments or museums or the tower. It's the latest apartments that people are living in. So the department stores are a huge thing these days, selling all kinds of items from Europe, America, well, maybe not America, but Rolex, Omega. Coffee shops are huge in North Korea today. They're everywhere. I've been to these coffee shops. They're amazing. And this, I will end with this. Here is a shot of the most famous and the most expensive, luxurious apartment. But this is not a North Korean TV show. It's a South Korean TV show. It's called Crash Landing on You. And in Crash Landing on You, they even show the latest apartments because this is what's trending today. And here's inside a coffee shop and the menu. Now, we don't know if this is exactly what it looks like, but the idea is even in Crash Landing on You in South Korea, they're showing this kind of new consumer lifestyle in North Korea. Okay, I will end it here and I will take any questions from you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for the nice presentation, Professor Kim. I don't know who would like to start with any questions, not just related to TV dramas or comedies, but maybe about Professor Kim's personal experience in North Korea, or I should go first, or I don't know. Teresa, okay. You can and raise hand. Okay, so I will let you know what Teresa asked. I think it's also a very important question about your personal experiences and personal trip to the DPRK. I don't know when it happened exactly, but at that time you were also a US citizen, of course. So that was the main question, that how was it possible to go there as a US citizen? And if I can add another aspect of this trip, as I mentioned that, of course, I have listened to the Enki News podcast about this story, and I have seen the picture with you and the author of the friend, Mr. Peck. And if you can tell us how this story, which was quite promising at the beginning, but I would say that it ended somehow in a very unfortunate way, leading you to be somehow blacklisted in the DPRK, if we can say that. So can you tell us a few words about this story? Yeah, thank you.
Sure. So I went to North Korea in 2015 to meet with the author. And I was able to do that because Trump was not in office at the time. Trump put the restriction in 2016. So I just barely made it. And we were scheduled to meet for one day. And I met with him. But before I went, I gave him about 50 questions. So before going to North Korea, I have to provide the questions I'm going to ask so that they know what kind of questions I will ask him. So I gave that to him well in advance. And when I met with him, he didn't just answer the questions, he actually typed out his answers. So it was like a 60-page book, basically. And I was so grateful that he took the time to type out his answers. And then, of course, we talked for many, many hours. I told him I was going to translate his novel. He was very excited about it. And again, I was only supposed to meet with him for one day, but he actually requested to meet with me 2 more days. So we met 2 additional days. We talked about the novel in great length. We talked about the writing culture in North Korea, how these novels, short stories are produced. We talked about, we went to karaoke and we sang songs. We went to a table tennis place and we played table tennis. And for those 3 days, it was amazing. How did I get to North Korea? Well, it was through a travel agency, and they were able to connect me with Mr. Peck. And so it was a life-changing experience for me. It really confirmed a lot of the things I knew about North Korean literature. I suspected it. I didn't know it was true, but when I went there and talked to him about it, it really confirmed my understanding of North Korean literature. And yeah, I was able to translate it. Now, unfortunately, when I met with the author, I didn't have a publisher with me. So I didn't have a contract. If I had a contract, I would have had him sign it, and the copyright issue would not have been a problem. But because I didn't have a publisher at the time, I just told him, I'm going to translate your novel, and he verbally agreed to it. So that was a problem. Later on, Columbia University picked up my book, and they published it. And after they published it, I got an email from North Korea saying, hey, Professor Kim, thank you for publishing our novel, but you broke the copyright laws. And, there's no way I can pay North Korea right now because it will be going against the US sanctions. If I pay them, I'll be in trouble here in the United States. And if I don't pay them, I'll be in trouble in North Korea. So at the moment, I don't think I am allowed to go into North Korea. I mean, I can go to North Korea, but if I go to North Korea, I think I'll be in trouble. So I'm going to avoid going to North Korea anytime soon.
Okay, thank you, Professor Kim. Maybe other question before going to the chat box? Well, not yet.
The question was raised in the chat.
Yeah. I will definitely Teresa, please. So the translation that how was the idea came? Okay, so it's still about the same. The same story that how that the idea came that you wanted to translate this book. It was an accidental or it was an intentional? Yeah.
No, it was not an accident. So when I was doing my research in South Korea, I went to the National Library, and inside the National Library, there's another library just for North Korea. And you have to have special permission to go in there and look at the books. Sorry, you don't need special permission to go in there. You need special permission if you want to check out the books. Because in South Korea, reading North Korean materials, watching North Korean materials is technically illegal. So if you want to look at North Korean materials, you can only do it inside this library. Okay. So I went to that library every day, and I looked at short stories and novels from the 1960s. Every month in North Korea, there is a journal that produces about 3 to 6 short stories. And so I would sit there from 1960, January, I would read 3, 4, 5, 6 stories. And then February, same thing. And I would read for the entire year. I would read the entire decade. 1960s, 70s, and 80s. Those were the 3 decades that I focused on. Let me tell you, after a while, almost every story looked the same. The only difference was Comrade Kim can be changed to Comrade Lee, to Comrade Park. It doesn't matter the name. The story was almost identical. So I thought, oh my gosh, North Korean stories are boring. They are not creative. They all start the same way and they all end the same way. And so after a while, I'm just glancing. I'm not even reading carefully. I'm just flipping through the pages. Yeah. I've read the story. This was 1960s. 1970s, even worse. I believe 1970s was the worst period in North Korea. It was so boring. And I'm just reading it through. I'm like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. One of the things I don't like about North Korean literature is, number one, anything to do with military, war. I don't like those stories. Ethnically, I am South Korean. However, I was born in the United States. So I don't need to go to the military in South Korea. Since I've never been to the military, I don't know anything about the ranks. Who is higher, who is lower, I don't know. And if you read these stories, it's all about rank. Oh, this person is higher than this person, and this person says something to this. And I'm just confused. And I'm like, I don't care about military ranks. I don't care about battlefields. I don't care about the war. It's too nationalistic to me. So whenever I see a war story, I avoid it. The second type of story I don't like is rural stories. Stories that take place in the farm, agricultural stories. The reason I don't like those stories is I was born in California. I was born in Los Angeles. I'm a metropolitan person. So I like to live in the city. I like to do things in the city. So if it talks about the countryside, the farms, I have no idea what they're talking about. So most of the stories that I focused on when I was reading all these short stories was the metropolitan story, anything that had to do with the city. So as I'm reading through the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, I learned that there was a pattern. 1960s has its own style. 1970s has its own style. And all of a sudden in the 1980s, it was completely different. So I thought, that's interesting. And I found a short story that was really good. I thought, And so I would keep reading, and I would find another short story that was really good. And this all happened to be in the 1980s. And then I started collecting all these short stories, put them together, and I realized, it's the same author. I like this author. I like his style of writing. I like her style of writing. And all of a sudden I put together these patterns, and I now have like 10 favorite authors in North Korea who were very active in the 1980s. So then I started looking and researching more about other works that these writers wrote. So I read all their novels. And one of the biggest and for me, the most favorite novel was Friend. And the reason I like Friend is the opening, the way it opened was very different from the other short stories and novels in North Korea. From the very beginning, Friend opens with a woman who wants to get divorced from her husband. And to me, I thought this was very shocking. This is very new. And there are so many stories in North Korea, novels, that I wanted to translate, but I have to think about my audience, my English-speaking audience. What story would Americans really be able to relate to? And I thought, it has to be divorce. Americans are crazy about divorce, right? If they're bored, they get divorced, right? So I thought, if I translate a story about divorce, it might do well in America. And so that's why I chose Friend, because it's about divorce.
Thank you very much, Professor Kim, for this detailed response. Now I would go for the chat box, but Martina Slonkova has a question. What was your first impression of the DPRK and especially its capital, Pyongyang, when you visited it? Is it presented realistically in the world media, or it was totally different for you?
Thank you. So I've been to North Korea twice. The first time was in 2008, and the second time was in 2015. When I was there in 2008, it wasn't very good. I was with a tour group. There were about like 6 or 7 of us. And, they took us to all the famous sites, the restaurants and all that. I didn't mind it. People always ask me, hey, when you were in North Korea, did they take you to the bad places? And I always tell people, no, they never took me to the bad. Why would they take me to a bad? I mean, if you think about any country in tourism, when people visit the Czech Republic, most people, they go to Prague. I know Olomouc is very famous as well, but most people would go to Prague. And most people would go to the cathedral, I believe it's the St. Charles Bridge. You know, they do the typical touristy thing. Nobody says, hey, I went to the worst place in Prague and it was dirty. There were homeless people. There were people doing drugs. You know, it was very dangerous. Nobody says that. And whenever people come to visit me in LA, Los Angeles, I take them to the famous sites in Los Angeles. I don't take them to the dangerous parts in Los Angeles. I don't even want to go to the dangerous parts in Los Angeles. So when people ask, do you go to the bad places in Pyongyang? I say, no. It would be ridiculous for me to go there. Right? And they would never take me there in the first place. So they always take you to the good places. Okay, now, the second time I was there, 2015, I was there by myself. It was a little scary to be in North Korea, to be there by myself. But things have changed dramatically compared to 2008. Number one, the biggest difference was everyone had cell phones. Everyone had mobile phones, and they were reading newspapers, reading all kinds of things, texting each other. They were watching television shows on their mobile phone. So that was the biggest difference. Number two, the biggest difference was there's obviously the state-run taxi service, but there was also private taxi service as well, something like an Uber or something. So that was really shocking as well. The next thing was all over, every restaurant, every department store I've been to, just walking down the street, you could hear the North Korean music. Not only the propaganda music, but the latest music, right? The girl group, the boy groups and all that, right? It was really fascinating. Right? It doesn't sound like K-pop, but it's their version of K-pop. Okay, so now I was there by myself, and I used to hear so many stories about, hey, you know, they always take you to places with a lot of people, and those people, it's just to show. They're not really there. So I thought, okay, let's see if this is true. So my guide, he said, Mr. Kim, let's go to restaurant A. It's very good over there. I said, really? Restaurant A? Okay, yeah, let's go to restaurant A. So we were walking to restaurant A, and all of a sudden I told him, hey, I don't want to go to restaurant A. I want to go to restaurant B. I wanted to see his reaction. And he said, oh, no, Mr. Kim, no, we can't go to restaurant B. No. I said, why not? Why can't we go to restaurant B? Let's go to restaurant B. So we went to restaurant B, and there was maybe one or two people in the restaurant. And he said, Mr. Kim, please, let's not go to restaurant B. It's not good. I said, no. Today we're going to restaurant B. So we went. And let me tell you, it was one of the worst foods I've ever had in Pyongyang. Terrible. And we were eating, and oh man, it was hard to finish that dinner. In fact, I didn't finish the dinner. And I told him, look, I'm really sorry. Tomorrow we'll go to restaurant A. So the next day, we went to restaurant A, and it was packed. So many people there. We sat and we ate, and let me tell you, it was probably one of the best dinners I've ever had in North Korea. So this idea of, oh, the North Koreans will put all these North Koreans inside the restaurant to show the world that, you know, they're eating and having a great time, but it's all fake. I don't believe that anymore, because first of all, I'm there by myself. Why would they put, 20, 30 people in a restaurant just for me, right? I mean, that's ridiculous. Number two, the food at that restaurant was so good. And that's why there's so many people there, not because they want to put them in there for show. So that's my experience of North Korea. Now, another thing that people ask is there a big difference between the wealthy North Koreans and poor North Koreans? That is absolutely true, yes. But that's like that in most countries, I think, right? The ones that can afford to go to these nice restaurants are the ones who make a lot of money. And the ones who can't, just don't make that much money. So I don't think it's that different in North Korea compared to the rest of the world. Realistic, I mean, I don't really know what realistic is. I think, whatever I saw is the everyday life of North Korea. I don't think it's any different from any other country.
Okay, thank you, Professor Kim. The last question here also came from Martina, so from the same person. You have to know that here the Korean studies section focuses much more on philology, so on the linguistics. So that's why the students can be interested in that. How do you see the difference between Choseoneo and Hangugo so the linguistics differences, if you can.
Yeah. So this is a good question. So linguistically, there's no difference. Okay. The grammar structure is the same. Generally, I would say, any native South Korean would be able to understand a North Korean dialect. The only difference, the major difference, is words, right? So there are different words that South Koreans use for the same object. It's just, the country's been divided for over 70 years. And, over those 70 years, new words come up in North Korea, new words come up in South Korea that they don't share, right? In South Korea, they use a lot more English than North Koreans, that's for sure. So for those who are familiar with South Korean things, for example, one of the biggest companies in South Korea is Paris Baguette, right? Or what South Koreans say, Paris Baguette, right? North Korea, you'll never find a baguette, right? They don't even know what a baguette is, right? However, they have a lot of Chinese and former Soviet Union influence. So in their foods, you're going to see a lot of that in the food, right? And South Koreans won't know what that is. Right? So it's the word choices that are different. In terms of sound, the dialect, yes, it's different, right? However, for me, it takes a long time. It takes me, I would say, it would take me a good 1 hour or more to finally have my ears open and understand a North Korean speaking. However, for a native South Korean person, it'll probably take them 5 or 10 minutes to get used to that dialect, and then they'll pretty much understand. Again, the sound is not that big of a struggle. It's the words that they might not know. It's because they just use different words.
Okay, thank you, Professor Kim. I have just one last question because we have just 5 minutes left. So I really want to ask about the future of the screen culture of the DPRK. You have slightly touched the parts of the technological development. And in addition to that, of course, we have seen many traces of digitalization and colorization of classic North Korean films. I just wonder that who actually watches nowadays North Korean TV, especially among the young generation, as you have also said, and many defectors also said that many people in North Korea watch, of course, K-dramas and South Korean TV shows. So I just wonder that what kind of movies do the North Korean theaters, cinemas, play now? And how do you see the future of the small and big screen culture in the DPRK? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I don't know about theaters anymore. I don't know if people actually, in North Korea, I don't know if people actually go to theaters anymore. Maybe in the rural areas, countryside, they might still go to a theater. But in Pyongyang, I hardly saw any lines in front of a theater. So I don't think people are going to watch actual films. Why? Because everything is now done on their phone, right? So they can watch TV shows, they could watch the news, they could watch reruns of old films that have been digitized, all on their phone now. So there's no reason for them to go to a physical theater. North Korea doesn't have a streaming service like a Netflix or whatever, but they have something similar to that, right? I don't know what the name is, but they have something similar to that. And I just spoke to a recent North Korean defector, and he was telling me, yes, that's how we all watch TV shows and the news. It's all on our phone now. Of course, they play games on their phone as well. So that's the new future, right? That's where they're heading. Everything is going to be streaming. Everything is going to be digitized. And it's already been digitized, but now everything's going to be available on their phone. Maybe they'll come up with a tablet. Who knows? They have personalized laptops, computers. So yeah, it's just a matter of time before they actually tap into the internet. As of now, they only have intranet within the country. Only some of the elites can access the internet from China and whatnot. It's just a matter of time. I can't give you a time period. A lot of people say, is it 10 years from now, 20 years from now? Who knows, right? But I know that they're going in that direction. And I know that they will never, ever go back to the way it was 20, 30 years ago. They'll never do that again, right? They are moving forward and they're not going to turn back.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, actually, you know what? Let me end with this one last thing. I don't know if people in the Czech Republic have something like an Amazon. Here in the United States, we have Amazon, right? You can buy items from Amazon. Well, North Korea also has their own version of Amazon, right? So it's absolutely fascinating, right? So you can purchase things online now.
Okay, thank you very much, and let's have a big applause. And of course, if anybody shows interest in this fascinating presentation, and if there are other questions left, of course, I will contact you with Professor Kim, and have a nice day in DC, and we should keep in touch. Thank you again. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye.